Hi, I'm Joshua Zable, your Statistical CFO. In today's session, I'm going to talk about why CFOs and other executives should care about what's happening on the manufacturing line. By having visibility into your manufacturing operations, you can unlock your greatest margin lever. Let's get into it. So why should CFOs or other executives care about what's happening on the manufacturing line? We're going to dive into it, but before we do, a little bit of background. First of all, this webinar is for financial professionals or frankly any leaders or executives that care about margin expansion in a manufacturing organization. A little bit about me. I'm the statistical CFO. I've run obviously different positions at different companies, both on Wall Street and Main Street. I've been a part of manufacturing organizations, software companies, so I have a pretty broad experience to understand the importance of looking at margin expansion. I think what's really important is over the course of this webinar, you'll get a deeper understanding of how manufacturing operations can really help you expand your gross margin, and why it's so critical for you, even if you're not a manufacturing person or you don't walk the manufacturing floor, to have visibility and understanding of what's going on in your operations. Okay, so did you know if you're not paying attention to what's happening on the manufacturing line, you're flying blind on your biggest margin lever? Of course, you're a manufacturing company. You can quote the statistical CFO on that one. And I hope by the end of this session, you'll understand why I say that. Okay, what's something we hear often? We want to expand margins. We need to save costs. As the CFO or leader, we're often tasked with how do we solve this problem? And often, as a CFO, we put forth pretty similar ideas, and they're similar because they work. Maybe we want to buy cheaper things, so we want to get into procurement or supply chain. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have to reduce headcount. Other times, we have to reduce spending like travel or even marketing. And one of the ways we can save is sometimes by delaying spending. Now, that's on the saving side. Other times, if you want to expand margins, you raise prices. Now, while these things all mathematically work, I think you all understand that they all have implications on both your employees and your customers. So, did you know that in a manufacturing organization, what show up in COGS or cost of goods sold represent 50 to 80% of total operating costs? That means that manufacturing operations, your gross margin, is really a finance problem, not an operations problem. And you'll hear me say that over and over because that should be the number one takeaway from this talk. Okay, so if gross margin is your biggest cost structure, why do we spend so much time looking to cut our operations and make them more efficient, when we could look at making our margin more efficient? Especially if we can have a much greater impact on the bottom line. In fact, operational improvements have double or more the impact than cutting SG&A. So if you improve your COGS, your cost of goods sold, you're actually going to have a bigger impact on your overall operating margin. And yet we spend so much time looking at SG&A and things below that line as CFOs. Again, we have to start thinking about gross margin as a finance issue, not a manufacturing issue or an operational issue. Now, you know this math. It's pretty simple. Assuming you're a profitable company, the COGS line is going to be higher up on your P&L than the SG&A line, which means if you make an impact, assuming your revenues are higher than your costs and you're a profitable company, you're going to have a bigger impact on your bottom line by improving your costs. You can see the math here. Put simply, a 3% cut in SG&A is going to have less of an impact than a 3% cut in your cost of goods sold. Okay, now, you might say, well, I'm not a manufacturing expert, but as a CFO of a manufacturing company, we need to be manufacturing experts. You can see here, I asked my friend ChatGPT to help me out of what's a typical manufacturing gross margin. And why did I do that? Because manufacturing gross margins can obviously be as high as 60%, but as low as 15%. And the lower your margin, the greater opportunity you have to make an impact. Okay, let's look at the math in a little bit more granular way at a more typical manufacturing operation. You can see here a company with a 30% gross margin, as opposed to a company before that I showed with a 50% gross margin. You can see the impact of a 3% cut on SG&A shows a 6% improvement in your operating margin or operating profit, and a 3% cut to cost of goods sold gives you a 21% improvement to your operating profit. And that's why, simply put, 3% of a 50% margin improvement is less of an impact than 3% of a change to a 30% margin. So it's really critical to understand your margin profile, but also understand that the lower the margin is, the more opportunity you have, and the more you should be focused as the CFO on focusing on that line rather than controlling or cutting expenses. Okay, fine. So you're a CFO. Chances are you have a finance degree, maybe accounting background, who knows? Maybe you've got a physics background. But you say, but I'm not a manufacturing person. Well, I'm going to do a little introduction to manufacturing operations, and we're going to learn about how you need to think about manufacturing operations, what you need to know, which also will be pretty straightforward and simple. And so you understand things, obviously, we don't know, we don't need to know. So let's jump into it. From a CFO or executive perspective, you really need to think of manufacturing operations in two ways. There's a production side of the house. On the production side of the house, you want to think of metrics like uptime, throughput and cycle time, and equipment reliability maintenance. This is really all about making your product, getting it through the factory and out the door, if you will. And in simple terms, it's thinking about your fixed costs and what you need to do to manufacture. The other side of the operation is the quality side. And that's making sure that what you put through the factory is meeting specifications and is good enough to send to your customers. Now, what's important for you is both of these impact your cost structure and your gross margin. Okay. On the production side, really think about fixed costs. You have machines. If the line isn't running because it's down, you're still paying for your rent, your electricity, all your overhead, but you're not utilizing that equipment. Cycle time. If you can make more widgets at the same time than less, your cost per widget goes down. And equipment reliability and maintenance has elements of fixed and variable. But fundamentally, if you can put more through the system, you're going to have a higher margin. On the quality side of things, you've got unplanned extra costs. If you have to throw stuff out, that becomes scrap. If your process isn't stable, you could have waste. These things can actually show up multiple times because not only are you throwing something out that costs money, but then you've got to buy something back because you've got to rebuy the supplies to make it again. So you can see clearly both the production and the quality side of manufacturing have impact on your gross margin. And these are key terms that you just need to understand at a high level to understand how are we doing on these metrics. Now, for the purposes of today's session, I'm going to spend time on improving uptime, which is one of the many things you can do. Now, if you love the session, and I'll ask you to comment later, please let me know if you want to hear more about the other elements, including quality, throughput, equipment. But for now, today, we're going to focus on uptime. So I'm going to do an example. I'm going to walk through the math and show you how by simply improving uptime and showing you how easy it is to think about that, what kind of impact you can have. Okay, so let's put a question. What happens when you improve uptime by 3%? So the first thing as a CFO or leader you need to understand is, what does that really mean when I improve uptime by 3%? Well, what it means is you're getting 3% more uptime, meaning you're getting your machines running 3% more in the same factories, using the same people, with the same equipment depreciation. And that really means you're getting more good output per dollar of fixed cost. So 3% uptime is actually what we call better fixed cost absorption, which is real savings and real margin expansion. Now, that seems a little bit amorphous, but I'm going to walk you through actually a real mathematical example for you to understand how this simple concept can have such a major impact. Okay, let's say you're the CFO of a company that makes widgets, and you make 100 widgets per day. Let's think about the cost of those widgets. You have $40 of fixed costs. That's the factories, some of the equipment, electricity, everything that you need to run the factory to make these widgets. You also have variable costs. The variable costs, in this case, let's say, are 60 cents per widget. Now, those 60 cents could be partly for employees that you need to pay, but it's also partly of the materials that go into making the widget. So if you add your fixed costs of $40 and your variable costs of 60 cents per widget, or $60 of the 100, you get to a cost of goods of $100. So your cost of goods sold per widget is $1. Pretty straightforward. Now, if you sell your widget for $3, your gross profit is $2. Okay, now let's say the next day you need to make 200 widgets. Going back to your fixed costs being $40 and your variable cost of 60 cents per widget, you can see that your cost for making the 200 widgets is going to be $160. That's the $40 in fixed costs plus the $120 in variable costs, or 60 cents times 200. Now, the cost of goods for those 200 widgets is $160, which means your cost of goods per widget is 80 cents, not $1. So you can see by simply making more widgets over the same fixed cost basis, you got higher fixed cost absorption, which means your gross margin, now if you sell a widget for $3, your gross profit instead of being $2 is $2.20. How does that play out on the P&L? Well, if you look at, again, going back to our sample manufacturing P&L, you can see what I've done is broken up the cost of goods into fixed and variable costs, similar to the example you just saw. And I'm showing you that a 3% improvement in uptime can save you, in this case, based on this example, $8.40, which goes right to the COGS line. And you can see immediately an 8% improvement in your operating profit. So as you can see, by simply having the machines run more and make more widgets, your margin goes up, your profits go up, and I haven't actually cut any costs at all, and yet have had a big impact on my operating margin. No layoffs, no need for new equipment. I didn't need to raise the price for my customers. I'm just operating more efficiently and putting more throughput through the same system. Okay, so you're the CFO. How do I impact uptime? Well, these are simple questions you can ask your operations. How much downtime did we have last quarter? How much fixed cost went unabsorbed due to capacity loss? And are we seeing manufacturing issues before they show up in the P&L? In other words, if you're having downtime, that will eventually hit your margin. And the last thing a CFO wants to be is surprised that their margin is lower than they expected because machines weren't running. The fastest way to move your margin is actually to stop paying for manufacturing capacity you're not using. Okay, but I'm a CFO. How am I going to impact this? How am I even going to understand this? I can ask the question, but how do I know about uptime? Well, it's really simple. You just need to look at it. So Minitab with SciTech offers a product called Data Exchange, which you can see here automatically collects your data. You don't have to be a manufacturing expert to understand green, yellow, and red. And as the CFO, this is a dashboard you want Because if you look on this chart and you look at the mill 3 all the way on the bottom, you can see that's clearly off track. There's downtime there. That's hitting your gross margin right now. And so as a CFO, you should be demanding to see, I want to understand what's going on at the factory or the shop floor level. There are different views you can look at. You can look by machine, you can look by factory. Again, very simple concept, very simple for a CFO to understand. If you're seeing red, you know that you're down, and that's not good for your margin. So at best, you're getting a preview into what's going to happen with your margin, but you're also going to be able to say, let's improve this and let's help make sure our margin can not only stay stable, but actually expand. Now, what kind of impact can you have by simply monitoring this? On average, less than 1% utilization increase will pay for your software. So this is a no-brainer in terms of return on investment to have this visibility. But here's really the exciting stuff. On average, our customers report 5 to 30% utilization increases, with averages being anywhere from 10 to 20%. And part of the reason this is the case is simply part of the Hawthorne effect, which is that just by the fact that you're watching it and you're monitoring it creates awareness around the risk or the problem. And by doing that and knowing the CFO is watching this, you will almost definitely have better performance. That means you not only get ROI on investing in the software, but you're going to get margin expansion almost immediately by simply putting in simple data collection and understanding of what's going on in your uptime. Now, of course, if you've got uptime problems or you're down, the first step is monitoring it to detect it. Simply by doing that, you will see improvement. Now, naturally, if there are bigger issues at play, you've got to go and fix the problem. Now, Minitab has a solution portfolio to help you do that. I'm not going to get into that today. But if you are down or you're not uptime, your uptime isn't where it needs to be, there are many ways to improve that as well. So identifying the problem will not only help improve the problem itself, but will also lead to further improvements. Okay, so what can I leave you with? Just because you're not operating machines doesn't mean you shouldn't have visibility on the shop floor. As CFOs, we often think of ourselves as operators. Part of being an operator of a business is understanding the manufacturing operations of your business and having an impact on ways in which can improve. And in this case, if you're the CFO and you don't have visibility into your largest margin lever, you're going to have a problem. So again, remember, manufacturing is not an operations problem. It's a finance problem. So what do you do next? It's really easy. You make a small investment in monitoring software. Get software on those machines to understand if you're up or you're down. And if you're already monitoring it, great. Are you aware of it? Are you challenging your manufacturing operations, your engineers, to make the appropriate improvement to drive improvement there? And of course, Minitab can help. We consult. We offer different solution packages, but your engineers can also figure these things out. It's really about having the visibility and making it an action plan as the CFO to take action about improving your productivity and throughput rather than your first go-to lever being cutting costs, reducing headcount, or raising price. Okay. Sometimes I'd rather be lucky than smart. Searching social media, really interesting. Paper about how you drive valuation of your manufacturing company. The number one item to drive valuation of your manufacturing company is visibility, tracking production metrics like quality and throughput. And so you can see, why is that? Because again, that's going to be the biggest margin lever, which creates value for your company. So again, if you start thinking of manufacturing as a finance problem, You have a lot of different ways to get after it. Okay, please feel free to leave questions, comments. We'd love to hear if you want to learn more about the quality side of the fence or want to learn more about throughput, and we're here to help you. Thank you very much.